Hey there, everybody. This is just a quick channel update, let you know what I've been up to lately. I know I haven't put out a lot of content recently. Not that I really do a lot of videos anyway, but I've been looking into the historical and cultural context of the New Testament. And if you looked at my community page, I recently posted that the New Testament was written in a Greco-Roman context to people who lived in a Greco-Roman context. And that includes people in Israel, includes all the Jews that are in the audience as well. And why would I say such a thing? And I've been looking into that more and more lately. And in studying the uh, context, the cultural and historical context of the New Testament, um, it's like I can't read enough. There's just so much going on. I've been reading Roman literature. I've read the Aeneid recently, and I'm reading that again. I'm also currently reading some works by Ovid, mostly the Metamorphoses. And I'm expecting in the mail today some works by a playwright named Terence, popular comedian in his time, and the writer Horace. So Horace, Ovid, and Vergil are more or less contemporaries in first century BC, and a little bit. Ovid lives a little bit into the first century AD, but their works were um, very popular and known to people throughout the Roman Empire. And what I have on the screen here is the Seleucid Empire. And why does that matter? It matters because under Alexander the Great, who conquered from way up here in Macedonia, through Greece, through most of what they called Anatolia, Asia, or what we call today Turkey, and out all the way to India and down into Egypt and all of that. And when Alexander died, his empire was broken up amongst his generals and lieutenants and whatever. And one of these areas was called the Seleucid Empire, and that included Israel. And the whole point of these little kingdoms that came after Alexander was Hellenization, Hellenizing these areas. And that includes Israel. It's because these areas are Hellenized that we get the Septuagint. That's the uh, Greek translation of the Old Testament. It's because of the Seleucids that we get in the Maccabean revolt. The high priest at the time was named Jason. That's a Greek name. It's because of the Hellenization that when Peter is proclaiming the gospel throughout the nation of Israel, he travels to Lydda, which is part of Israel. There's a man named Aeneas, and he's probably a Jew because we haven't really been introduced to a lot of Gentiles yet. Cornelius is yet to come after this. Now, this is a Greek name, but also a hero to the Romans. So when Pompey conquers Judea in the 60s BC, then comes the process of Romanization. And not long after Pompey, you have Herod the Great. And Herod the Great is a big fan of the Romans and carries out a lot of Romanization. And if we go and we see, so this is Israel, this is the Dead Sea, here's Jerusalem here, Lydda is here, okay? And then up the coast a little bit, this is still part of Israel, or what the Romans knew as Judea, is Caesarea, okay? And up here we have the Caesarea National Park. Let's see if I can pick that out. Yep, here it is. Okay, it's the Caesarea National Park. Okay, so here we have the circus. If you've ever seen the movie Ben-Hur, and there's the chariot race in the circus, this is where the circus would be. It'd be in Caesarea. And this would be the capital of uh, the province of Judea. This is where Pilate governed from. Pilate was in Jerusalem when Jesus was crucified, of course. He was there observing their religious festival for Passover. The Romans respected the Jewish religion, not that they followed it, practiced it themselves, but they respected it because it was older than their own religion, older than their own existence. which they were fascinated by. Anyways, and up here you have a really impressive Roman amphitheater. This was built all by Herod. And Herod had built a large um, man-made harbor. Today we have this smaller man-made harbor, but you can see this shadow here on the screen. And here, these areas are what remains of what Herod had built, a very large harbor. Could have held dozens of ships along the jetty. That's pretty awesome. And I guess there was some kind of palace or something over here. So this is awesome, right? But this isn't the only thing that Herod Romanized. Back in Jerusalem, we have the Fortress of Antonia, right? You've heard of the Fortress of Antonia. It was right next to the temple complex in Jerusalem. Well, the thing about that is, and I haven't prepared by presuming, so I can find all these things, um, where the present-day Dome of the Rock is and the Wailing Wall, you had right next to the temple complex the Fortress of Antonia. Why is it called that? Because Herod was a friend of Marc Antony. Marc Antony had been one of Julius Caesar's trusted generals. And after Julius Caesar was assassinated, there was a power struggle in Rome. Who was going to control Rome? Was it going to be the Senate? Was it going to be Octavian, who was Julius Caesar's nephew? Or was it going to be Marc Antony and Cleopatra, um, who had also been trusted companions of Julius Caesar? Who would it be? And of course, it was ultimately Octavian. And Herod went to Octavian and said, hey, by the way, I supported Marc Antony. I admit it. And Octavian used Herod to continue governing Judea more or less in a Roman sort of way. So that's really interesting. So that's all part of the context of the New Testament. It's very Greco-Roman. And so what helps us is to get out of our current frame of mind. And I'm talking to Americans, but there's a few Canadians in the audience as well, um, generally speaking. We need to forget what our 21st century point of view is here as a Western nation and in our cultural context. We need to forget about that and understand the cultural context in which the New Testament was written and to whom it was written at the time. Yes, by application, there are things that apply to us. I'm not saying that they don't. Don't get me wrong. But just so we can understand, how did those people understand certain terms and words at the time? And one of those words is predestination. How did they understand predestination as pagans before they became Christians? And why is that important? And I think if we studied more of the Greco-Roman context, we would not be so resistant to the doctrines of grace. But we find here in the West, especially more so in America in particular, we find resistance to the doctrines of grace because the idea of choices being made on our behalf is offensive to an American, right? Especially an American. So those are the things I've been thinking about and why I've been diving into the Greco-Roman context is to understand that culture more. Um, it's these are questions that have come up throughout dealing with um, anti-Calvinists and people who don't like Reformed theology in general. They don't like the idea of the covenant of works, the covenant of grace, the covenant of redemption. They don't like those concepts necessarily, but they really don't like what they call Calvinism or the doctrines of grace. They don't like those things, and uh, but we need to understand first of all those things come from Scripture, and how can we know that the readers understood those things in a certain way, and we can understand by knowing what their culture was, because Paul certainly knew their culture. So here's something that's crazy, right? Paul is from um, a part of the Asia Minor Paul of Tarsus, right? Or Saul of Tarsus as he had been known. Tarsus was in the Roman province of Cilicia, or the Romans would have said Cilicia, in this general area, and had been conquered by Pompey. It had previously been part of the Seleucid Empire, and then became part of the Roman Empire. Paul grew up in a Greco-Roman context. Paul clearly read and studied Greco-Roman writers and philosophers. He knew the culture because he grew up in it. He was steeped in it. So that's just really interesting to me. So that's what I've been up to. I've been studying a lot, reading a lot, as much as I can. And I have a lot more reading to go. So as I learn more things, I will share them with you, Lord willing. All right, everybody. That's all I really want to say. Just a quick update. 11 minutes, and I say it's a quick update. Anyway, I hope you're having a good day in the Lord. See you later.